gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? By Great 78.
Who gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? I've seen those English dramas too. They're cruel. So if there's any other way to spell the word, it's fine with me. With me.
Chapter 16. The Man Who Sold the World. Draco. Sunday, October 31st, 1999. Peckwater Flat 307, Christchurch College, Oxford, England. Draco awoke the following morning to the sound of the door of the flat closing loudly. The slam echoed in his head, slicing into his brain like an ice pick. Investigating, he found light snores coming from Theo's room, but complete silence from Granger's. A hominium revelio confirmed that she was gone, her room empty. She and the muggle bloke must have stayed as quietly as possible to avoid waking him, but had evidently left. His head fell back to his pillow with a self-pitying thunk. Almost immediately, a haphazardly stacked pile of laundry tumbled atop his head. He pushed it aside angrily and sat up to better survey the kingdom of rubbish and mess he'd created for himself. Draco was tired of this. Tired of the constant garbage, the disgusting dishes, and the wrinkled clothing everywhere. He was done with this game that he'd been playing, pretending to be an absolute pillock who had never picked up a fucking thing in his entire life. It went against his deepest nature, having this mess about. He may not have been required to pick up after himself growing up, but he damn well knew how. He decided, then and there, that if Granger did have feelings for him, she would have to love him for the wizard that he was, not for who she could shape him into. He took a deep breath, the decision that he'd made in the liquor-fueled early morning hours still firmly lodged in his brain. He would tell her how he felt, he resolved. Hopefully, it wasn't too late, and she wasn't already too deeply involved with this horrid Jason fellow. Concentrating hard to push aside his headache, Draco flourished his wand around the room. He swept the pizza crusts, crisp bags, and biscuit wrappers into a pile, then levitated the lot to the rubbish bin. The dishes flew into the sink, set upon by a quick washing spell. A few more flicks of his wand of hawthorn, and his now unwrinkled clothes were neatly hung in the closet into which he'd apparated last night. With a twisting motion of his wrist, the bedding and blankets that he'd slept upon were shrunken and stowed away in the same closet. Satisfied with his quick work of the place, he crossed into the tiny room to enter the loo for a piss, and then to splash a bit of water on his face. As he dried his cheeks, another loud sound rent the air, the crack of apparition this time. He threw open the toilet door, thinking perhaps it might be Potter. Kingsley Shacklebolt stood, surveying the new cleanliness of their sitting-room.
"Malfoy, I'm so pleased that you finally got yourself together enough to straighten this filth."
Draco gritted his teeth. Salazar's sack. He felt like goblin piss warmed over, and now he would need to spar with the Minister for Magic. He cursed his probation, which prevented him from possessing controlled potions. What he would not give for a hangover cure right now. Minister, what a lovely surprise. And so early in the morning. He managed to get out.
"Yes, I don't have much time. I'm expected for brunch any minute now at the Tonks residence. Andromeda likes everyone to be on time, no matter if you are the Minister for Magic or not. Besides, I did not wish to encounter Miss Granger, and she will likely only be out for an hour or so."
Draco had several questions that he would not give voice to. How did Shacklebolt know that Granger would only be an hour? How long had Shacklebolt been friends with Draco's estranged aunt? And could this wizard talk in a quieter tone? Regarding his aunt, he'd thought many times about writing to Andromeda, but had yet to bring himself to do so. He felt sure that, with the sorrows the woman had to deal with in her life,
meeting her ex-Death Eater nephew was fairly low on her priorities list. Not to come off as rude, Minister, but what are you doing here? I'm rather busy this morning, Draco said shortly. He picked up Granger's orange beast and resettled the feline on the sofa that he himself had so recently abandoned. From the club chair that was mostly covered in orange fur, Draco rescued the black t-shirt that the creature had been using as a bed, performing a Tergio spell to remove most of the offending cat hair. Crookshanks watched, boredly, kneading biscuits into a pillow on the sofa. Shacklebolt pursed his lips. The Wizengamot received a letter a couple of days ago, and the chief warlock brought it to my attention. It was from Miss Granger, asking for an inquiry into grades tampering within her magical courses here at Oxford. Draco's breath quickened as he raised one eyebrow meaningfully. And are they going to look into it? The minister gave him a hard stare. Chief Dagry has agreed to hold off on any formal investigation for a couple of weeks. I told him that I would look into it and hopefully resolve this without the need for a ministry probe. Draco nodded shortly, his teeth clenched. So, I suppose that's what this is, then. Your show at an investigation. It was Shacklebolt's turn to look confused. He walked over to the sofa and picked up the orange half-Kneasel, holding him carefully. The beast eyed Shacklebolt mistrustfully, but allowed the inconvenience once Shacklebolt settled him on his arm and began to pet his back. I'm not sure what you're implying, Mr. Malfoy. I very much wish for Miss Granger to succeed in her studies here at Oxford. But not the magical courses. Right, Minister? Only the Muggle ones, he sneered. Shacklebolt smiled falsely. Miss Granger is a Muggle. No, she's a Muggle-born witch, Draco said, with the greatest effort at maintaining control of himself. His eyes flashed angrily at the other wizard. The feline in the minister's arms suddenly pushed at the man's chest to be let down. The minister dropped him, and the half-Kneasel landed with a rough thunk on the floor below, before returning to the club chair near where Draco stood. Shacklebolt's smile grew. Of course, that's what I meant to say. Silly me. As you said, it's an early morning. I must not be thinking straight. Draco let this statement hang in the air for a moment before responding, looking the minister hard in the eye. Right. I'm sure that's what you meant to say. But suddenly, there was something wrong in Draco's head, besides the spinning hangover that threatened to expel his stomach bile post-haste. It was an odd sensation, one at once familiar and simultaneously foreign to Draco. It was quick, over in an instant, and at first he did not know what it was. Then Shacklebolt's smile grew wider. Actually, Mr. Malfoy, the letter from Miss Granger wasn't the only reason I came to speak with you. You see, it's come to my attention that she is no longer seeing the young Weasley wizard. Draco shook his head, as though clearing cobwebs from its corners. What has that got to do with anything? Other than to show that her taste level has likely improved considerably, he snapped, bringing a hand up to his temple to hold his head steady. I've just been thinking of another way that we can solve all of our problems. Yours and mine, I mean, Shacklebolt said smoothly. Now, both of Draco's eyebrows shot up. Well, Minister, seeing as I have no problems except for this whole spying on Granger situation, I would love to hear this proposal of yours. The older wizard's smile was almost sinister now. Funny enough, a proposal is precisely what I have in mind. I fully expected that I was going to have to convince you, but now I feel certain that you'll be pleased to comply. Shacklebolt sat gingerly on the arm of the sofa, the one that Potter had cleaned of chocolate or brown sauce, only a couple of days before. You see, When I came to you months ago, I gathered that you had a passing interest in Miss Granger that was decidedly intimate in nature. But I was operating under the assumption that your feelings for her did not run so very deep. I assumed that, like my godson, your interests in her were firmly, shall we say, physical in nature.
Draco was breathing quite shallowly now. He purposefully avoided Shacklebolt's eyes, choosing instead to stare at the swishing tail of Granger's Kneazle, even as he knew that it was too late.
That's pretty much the short of it, Shacklebolt. What other reason would I have to be interested in Hermione Granger?
Shacklebolt tilted his head boredly, as if trying to solve a curious riddle, one in which he truly did not care about the answer, one way or the other.
Yes, that's kind of the odd thing, you see. I have known your parents for many years. I know precisely how you were raised, Draco. I was raised much the same way, though I was taught to hide certain pure-blood tendencies, those that don't play well to the general populace.
Draco gave a humorless laugh.
Right. As you know, pure-blood customs dictate that we marry someone of equal, or nearly equal, blood purity. Tainting the family lineage is tantamount to murdering one's ancestors. You think Mercutio Knott isn't still spinning in his grave at the thought of his grandson's mother being a half-blood witch?
Shacklebolt jerked his thumb at Theo's locked bedroom door.
I always found Evangeline to be quite delightful, but she was not meant to be marriage material for a man of Tiberius's placement in the wizarding community.
Draco sighed.
Forgive me, Minister, but what the fuck does this have to do with anything? I could truly care less about marriage idiosyncrasies of the Sacred 28, or anyone else, for that matter, at the moment. I feel like a beaver's knob right now, a head full of splinters, and a mouth packed with sawdust. I just need a cup of tea, and perhaps a couple of fried eggs on toast to absorb the rest of the alcohol in my system. If you don't mind, can we get on with it?
Shacklebolt shot him an ugly look before continuing.
Before today, Mr. Malfoy, I had been operating under the assumption that you thought along the same lines as myself and Mercutio and your own father, that blood impurities had no place within the wizarding world.
Draco breathed in and then out, his heart beginning to race for seemingly no reason.
And what's changed about today?
There was that sinister smile again.
You see, Malfoy, I'm a bit of a skilled legilimens. Not as prolific as my cousin Aradia, of course, but I must admit I'm quite good.
Fuck. Most of the wizarding world knew the name Aradia, as in Aradia Vesper Zabini. Her skills at natural and unobtrusive legilimens were mentioned in every magazine spread for which she'd been interviewed. Draco closed his eyes, realizing his mistake. That sensation in his head that he'd experienced moments before, the one that had been at once familiar and foreign, he knew what it was now. He'd only experienced it a handful of times, but now that he recognized it for what it was, it settled like a lead weight in the center of his brain. His first run-in with legilimency had been when he was cornered by Snape in his 6th year at Hogwarts. The older wizard had demanded to know the particulars of the assignment given to him by the Dark Lord. Snape had attempted to enter his mind, gentle fingers probing his thoughts. The professor recognized his fledgling attempts at occlumency, and reluctantly yielded to Draco's need for secrecy. Later that school year, after he had failed to kill the headmaster, the Dark Lord himself had bludgeoned his way into Draco's head to see the memory of Dumbledore's death for himself. Draco had somehow managed to bury the final seconds that the two wizards had been alone from what the Dark Lord saw of the event. He'd felt confounded for a couple of days after that, and elected to stay in his Scion suite at the manor, alone and in the dark, to give his mind a chance to heal itself. But by far, his worst experience with legilimency had also been the only truly successful time that he had blocked illegilimens. It was immediately after Granger had escaped with Potter, Weasley, and his father's old house elf, along with the battered goblin that Bellatrix had been ready to slice up, right before everything went to shit. When Potter had reached for the 3 wands in Draco's grasp, Draco had allowed Potter to overtake him. In the moment, he'd put up only the briefest of fights before realizing what the wizard intended to do, namely get himself and the others the hell out of Malfoy Manor. As soon as the thoughts had occurred to Draco, he had relinquished the wands gladly, letting them go with only the briefest show of trying to wrestle them away from the other wizard. Draco knew that the wands had been the only way that all of them could get away. Whilst Dobby was able to apparate in and out of the manor because of his elfin magic still being tied to the ley lines of the ancient house, the group had been separated. There would have been no way for the tiny elf to leave with all of them at once, before his mother or his aunt reset the wards. Weasley and Potter needed the wand of a resident or a family member to leave. Draco realized that, and in a split-second decision, he gave up control of his wand, along with that of his Aunt Bellatrix, and the 3rd one that the pair of them had brought up from the cellar. After they escaped, Draco called upon every occlumency technique he knew to hide away his true thoughts and memories about Granger, and about his part in the group's escape. It had been a close thing. His aunt was a skilled legilimens, as was the Dark Lord. It had taken his brain days to recover from the strain of their probing, but he knew that it had been necessary. But he had grown complacent in peacetime. He had not been expecting legilimency to be performed upon him, and he was not ready for it. Shacklebolt had caught him unawares, and had entered his mind so smoothly and easily that Draco had not even recognized it as it happened. The older wizard had seen Draco's true thoughts and feelings about Hermione that lived in the front of his brain. He had seen Draco's plans to tell the witch exactly how he felt about her. And, true to his Slytherin pure-blood roots, Shacklebolt was now altering his plans so that he could turn this knowledge to his greatest advantage. So, Draco Malfoy, heir to 2 of the most noble and ancient houses within the Sacred 28, loves a mudblood. Is that the long and the short of it? Shacklebolt snarked. Draco gritted his teeth at the use of the insult, but said nothing. Yes, I think this will solve several of our combined problems in one fell blow, the minister continued to himself. In spite of himself, Draco asked, What do you mean? You are in love with Miss Granger, is that correct? So what if I am? Draco would neither confirm nor deny the minister's proclamation, but he knew that the ploy was useless. He was certain that the information was at the forefront of his mind when the minister had entered it. He had been thinking about how he needed to get rid of the minister so that he could focus on telling Granger exactly how he felt about her. He could curse himself for his foolishness now. I think the 2 of you would make an excellent pairing, Shacklebolt said simply. You, as her husband, can rein in her more radical ideas. You can help shape her into a close approximation of a pure-blood wife. She may never be fully accepted by pure-blood wizarding society, but let's be honest, neither will you. After all, you were a Death Eater, which will never play well for the progressives. You were inept at the job, so the purists will never accept you, and you had a half-blood and a mudblood testify for you in court, so you are naturally seen as weak. Draco's jaw twitched in anger, but he said nothing. Yes, the minister went on as though Draco had agreed with everything wholeheartedly. You can make it your job to keep Hermione Granger in line. She can focus on proving herself worthy of being your wife, on ingratiating herself with proper wizarding society.
She will forget her own ambitions and eventually take up yours. I have no ambitions, Minister, Draco said through clenched teeth, his mind blank as it shuttered itself against further intrusion from the other wizard. Oh, but that's not true. I'm certain you eventually wish to restore your family's position within Malfoy Limited. Shacklebolt smiled. Draco shook his head. Not really. To be honest, I never had the business sense of my father. Count yourself lucky that you never had any of the sense of your father at all, Malfoy, Shacklebolt said, with a wry curl of his lip. Truly, that isn't a bad thing. Your father may have made millions of galleons, hand over fist, but he also got himself caught up in that Death Eater nonsense, instead of staying neutral and watching the winds of popular opinion blow thither and yon. At least you've got that going for you. You realized before you threw your entire life away that perhaps aligning yourself entirely with Voldemort wasn't the smartest decision.
Draco was silent, mute in his outsized anger at both the man in front of him and the man who had sired him. It was because of the two of them that he found himself in this position, and he hated them both heartily for it.
Well, it's settled, then. You will ask Miss Granger for her hand in marriage. Once the two of you are wed, you will have earned some partial redemption in the wizarding world because of her popularity, and she will no longer be any sort of threat to me in my position as minister. So long as she carries the mantle of Malfoy, there is zero chance that our people will elect her as their leader.
Shacklebolt sneered at him from across the tiny room. Draco detected a low growl from Granger's cat, and briefly wondered how the minister's reflexes were against felines. There was a low laugh bubbling deep in his throat.
What's so funny, Mr. Malfoy?
Well, forgive me, Minister, but you are forgetting one very important thing.
Enlighten me.
Hermione Granger would never, in her darkest hour, agree to marry me. Today, or likely any day in the future, Draco said, hating the fact that this was probably true. Yes, he had been planning to confess his love to Granger, but he had no delusions in believing that she might feel the same towards him. His only hope had been to plant the thought within her mind that perhaps he wasn't entirely bad, that maybe he wasn't still the foul, evil cockroach he'd once been. Shacklebolt tilted his head, as though again considering this.
It is very hard to say, to be entirely honest. Until this letter arrived at the ministry 2 days ago, I would have assumed the same. But now, well, see for yourself.
Shacklebolt withdrew a piece of parchment from within his robe pocket. Shaking the letter open, he passed it to Draco. Draco skimmed the letter quickly. In it, Granger had detailed her suspicions about grades tampering, and had offered the examples that the two of them had found as evidence. At the bottom of the letter, however, she had written a small postscript that had Draco's breath rushing out of his lungs in shock. My close friend and confidant, Draco Malfoy, has offered to help me in tracking down the culprit who has tampered with my examinations. Whilst I very much appreciate his kind and generous offer of help, I care about him very much, and about his well-being. I will not jeopardize his parole by asking him to do this. He's worked too hard and come too far to put his freedom on the line by investigating this matter for me. I don't wish to see him caught up in the middle of whatever this is, so I'm taking it upon myself to call for a proper investigation by the Ministry of Magic. As Draco read, he could feel his occlumency slipping and cracking at the words. My close friend, she'd called him. I care about him very much. I don't want to see him caught up in the middle of this. Draco tried and failed to suck in a proper breath, his emotions causing a lump in his throat. He waited several seconds, then tried it again. his occlumency walls now mostly rebuilt. He looked up defiantly at the Minister for Magic. "And what do you think this proves, Minister?" Shacklebolt only smirked at him, not even bothering to try legitimacy again. Draco had a feeling that it was wholly unnecessary, anyway. He might have been able to school his brain into occluding, but his shaking hands that gripped tightly to the parchment belied his inner emotions. "As a member of the Order of the Phoenix, I have gotten to know Hermione Granger well enough these past few years. When she hates with her entire being. But when she loves, or at least when she finds a cause to champion, for her, perhaps that's the same thing. No matter. When she loves with her entire being as well. She may not have said the words, but I am able to read between the lines. Hermione Granger cares about you very much. Hell, she may not even know it herself, but she does. And you are going to find a way to use that to both our advantages." Draco shook his head in utter disbelief. "You're absolutely mental. You know that?" Shacklebolt's jaw hardened as he clenched his teeth. "Believe what you will, Mr. Malfoy. The opinions of an ex-Death Eater besotted with the mudblood matter very little to me. Do what you can to expedite this situation, so that she drops this whole investigation nonsense. Let me know when you've managed to move things in the right direction. I'll give you a couple of weeks to court her and make your intentions towards her known. And, Malfoy." Draco looked up, his silver eyes flashing at Shacklebolt for just a moment, before looking away swiftly. He did not answer. The Minister went on as though he had. "Don't muck this up." With a snappy crack of apparition, the Minister for Magic disappeared. Granger's Kneasel jumped up as though electrified at the brief noise, then leapt onto the sofa to sink his front claws into the cushions. Like Draco, the animal detested showing his fear, so he stalked back and forth across the sofa cushions imperiously, pretending that the leap from the club chair had been intentional. With a deep sigh, Draco dropped to the sofa and drew the furry feline to his chest, settling the molting beast upon his freshly deferred black shirt. He stroked the animal whilst lost in thought, trying to figure out what to do. After a moment's disquiet, the beast settled against Draco, his bones and angry orange fur relaxing upon his new human perch, with a steady rumble of purring. Was what Shacklebolt said true? Was there any chance that Granger cared about him? As a friend? Possibly even something more? He shook his head in disbelief at the very idea. But the words from Granger's letter echoed deeply in his mind. "Close friend and confidant, kind and generous. I care about him very much." This sweet, lovely witch had put these words to parchment, and sent them out into the world to be read by other magical folk, witches and wizards who knew precisely of whom she wrote. That was twice now that she'd spoken well of him, to a group whose literal job it was to judge people. Both times had been intentional and immutable. Granger had everything to lose, and nothing to gain both times she'd defended him. With her words and her actions, she'd given him the greatest gifts a person could give, his freedom and her friendship. Draco had hoped that by putting himself between Granger and the might of Shacklebolt, that he would have the chance to play the catcher in the rye for her. He could save Granger, protect her from all of this. Instead, Shacklebolt planned to manipulate his feelings, and hers, to his own advantage. Draco would be no catcher in the rye, but a snake in the grass. He must have dozed off again, because now there was a steady, intermittent ringing noise that woke him.
He leapt from the sofa, hurtling the coffee table with a grace that might have eluded a lesser wizard, and stared around the room in confusion, trying to identify the sound. Theo's voice shouted through his door, "Answer the fucking telephone!" Through the fog of his hangover, Draco located the device, an unassuming cream-coloured box that he'd seen Granger attached to the wall the day after they'd moved in. He picked up the entire thing and shook it. It rang in his hands, the sound vibrating into his palms. "I said, answer the fucking phone!" Theo's door now banged open, revealing the naked man, his dark hair wild and sticking up worse than Potter's ever had. "Lift the handle and say hello!" Draco only stared at him in mute confusion for a moment, before looking back at the device. Then, placing it back onto the desk, he lifted only the top, which he now found was surprisingly lightweight compared to the rest of the odd device. He held the piece at arm's length, the tight coil connecting the two pieces wrapping itself around the desk drawer handles at his thigh. "Hello?" he said hesitantly. Nothing happened. "Hold the damn thing to your ear, you fucking wanker! God, the man gets drunk and forgets how to use the telephone!" Theo laughed over his shoulder at the barely stirring Laura and Cora, even as he gave a hard stare to Draco. "Act normal," the look seemed to implore. Mistrustfully, he brought the piece up to his ear. "Hello?" he asked again, with more confidence this time. "Good morning. I'm trying to reach Hermione Granger," a vaguely familiar voice said. "She's out," Draco said shortly. "Would you mind telling her I called?" the feminine voice asked. I suppose I could," he answered, unsure of the etiquette. "Thank you. This is Amelia. Is this Draco?" the voice asked now, seemingly more interested. Draco dropped his head into his free hand, the headache from the hangover pulsing back fiercely. How had she known? Yes. This is Draco." There was a long pause, and at first Draco thought she might have ended the connection. But then she said, "Oh, that's right! I forgot that you were flatmates." "Right. Hermione and I went to secondary school together, so we've known each other for years," Draco offered, as though this explanation would suffice for why two former enemies shared a space that was too small for a family of Cornish pixies. "Well, that's lovely, then. You know, Draco, I was so disappointed when you left without saying goodbye last night," Amelia said in a wheedling tone. "I had hoped to get to know you better." His first instinct was to shut this down immediately. He was uninterested in this woman, and there was no reason to allow her to think otherwise. Now was his chance to tell her this. Then his mind flashed upon that morning's conversation with the Minister for Magic, as well as the words from Granger's letter to the Wizengamot once more. "Close friend and confidant, kind and generous. I care about him very much." Sorry, I wasn't feeling well last night. I came straight home and went to sleep," Draco replied. "Perhaps I can make it up to you. Can we meet for drinks later this week?" Amelia seemed to purr through the teletone. "That sounds brilliant. I'll see you in class tomorrow. We can make plans." Of course, sweet," Draco said, swallowing his stomach bile. "Bye, then." There was a click, and Draco understood that she had severed their conversation. He placed the piece of the device that he'd been holding to the side of his face back onto the desk, and heaved a sigh, dropping to the sofa. For better or worse, he was now apparently seeing Amelia, for drinks at least. He was sure that if it was up to her, there would be far more to it. Draco sighed deeply. He had been so close to getting everything he wanted, he realized now. But if he truly was going to protect Granger, he had to push her away. If he told her how he felt,
and she felt anything close to that in return. Granger would be playing directly into Shacklebolt's plans.
What the fuck was that about, exactly, Malfoy? Who were you making plans with?
Theo closed his bedroom door behind himself, tying up his silk dressing gown. With a flick of his wand, the wizard cast a muffliato around the two of them, so that his guest could not overhear.
I thought this whole time you were hung up on Granger. Now you're meeting other birds for drinks. What gives?
Times change, Draco offered simply, raking his fingernails through his hair and not meeting Theo's eyes.
Dragon shit,
Theo answered.
I know you, Draco, and you haven't let this go. I heard Shacklebolt show up a little while ago. I don't know what the hell is going on with you and Shacklebolt and Potter, but if you hurt that witch, too late, he ground out. His head was pounding once more. Merlin, what he would not do for a hangover cure right now. Theo sneered. Right. He summoned a drinking glass from the kitchenette, using his wand to fill it with water, and then gulping it down. Look, Drake, I know I come off as a complete asshole most of the time, and you may not believe that I have Hermione's best interest at heart. I know who my father and my godfather are. Tiberius might be the one in Azkaban, but it isn't like Shacklebolt is some perfect cherub from on high. My mother cared about him, but she always knew who he was. There were plenty of reasons that Evangeline didn't try to find a way to allow me to stay with him during the war.
Draco breathed a disgusted sigh, but said nothing.
So what? Is he threatening you? Forcing you to give up your chance with Hermione? Let me guess. You're not good enough for her.
Despite the seriousness of the conversation, Draco laughed. You told me that yourself a year ago, remember?
Well, people can be wrong. That was when I thought you were just in it for the quick shag. I know differently now.
Theo shrugged.
So what exactly is going on?
But Draco was silent. The time that Theo might have been able to help him had passed. He needed to stick to this new plan now. Drive Granger away, and hope that it would keep her safe. After a moment or two of Draco's silence, Theo gave up and returned to his room, his annoyance with Draco obvious. Draco looked up to inspect the tiny sitting room once more, now entirely neat and tidy. That would not do. The ploy to act like a grotty, objectionable excuse for a human being might not have driven Granger into his arms, but it had annoyed her well enough. He had to maintain that facade. He had to make her believe that he was unworthy of her. Because he was. With copious regret, he duplicated the filth from earlier that morning, then went further to wreak havoc upon the little room. He opened and dumped out nearly every crisp bag in the cupboard, stomping the bits into the rug under his feet. He unfolded his clothing and wadded it into piles upon the floor and furniture. He opened the rubbish bin and poured the contents across the desk. He summoned several pairs of socks from Granger's room, multiplying them twice over. Putridio maxima, he said, pointing his wand at them, then wrinkling his nose in disgust. The waves of odour coming off of them seemed almost rancid. These he flung under the coffee table, which was now laden with every dish they owned, freshly soiled. He used his wand to summon a bottle of butterbeer, to pour over the mess, the finishing touch upon a pile of offal. By the time he was done, the sitting room of the flat looked as though it had been ransacked by a niffler on euphoria elixir, and Draco was exhausted. He checked his watch. According to Shacklebolt, Hermione would be back any moment now. Summoning the last unwrinkled pair of trousers from the coat closet, he pulled them on, shoving his feet into his oldest dragon-hide boots from the closet floor, where he'd appeared the previous night. "Creature," he said quietly, uncertain if the elf would answer a direct summons from him. But luck was on his side for once. A tiny crack, and the ancient elf appeared.
"Yes, Master Malfoy." Can you ask your master, Harry Potter, to meet me at the Oxford bus station? That's the closest apparition point." The elderly elf bowed with far more ease than Draco would have thought possible, given his age. "Yes, Master Malfoy." Another pop, and he was gone. Heaving a quick sigh, Draco turned on the spot and disapparated just as quickly.
Gives a fuck about an Oxford comma. I seen those English dramas too. They're cruel.
Thank you for listening to Who Gives a Fuck About an Oxford Comma by Great78. If you enjoyed the story and would like to listen to more, please follow me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Silver and Copper. Or you can find me under Great78 on Archive of Our Own.